Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:06 on this busy Friday. Thanks for tuning in. Coming up at 7:35, Bram Weinstein is going to give us his predictions on the Commanders' chances down in Tampa Bay against the Baker Mayfields. That's the name of that team, isn't it? The Tampa Bay Baker Mayfields? I think that's right. 8:05 is Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares. And then at 8:35, Brett Baer, Fox News Channel. It's Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka on a Friday.
And it's a Friday as well. Good morning, Larry and everybody.
Is that a Caribbean thing, that Friday thing? Where did you pick that up from?
No, I'm a joyful person, and Fridays make me especially joyful. So I said, it's a Friday.
Yeah, that's great. I'm joyful, too. Joining us right now is Tom Fitton. He's the president of Judicial Watch. Happy New Year, Tom, and thanks for joining us.
Happy New Year to you both.
A 5-4 decision from the Supreme Court yesterday will allow the sentencing to go forward today. So much to unpack here, but first your reaction to this decision with Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett joining with the liberals on the court saying, well, listen, it's not a problem. He's president, and he'll be able to appeal it if he doesn't like it, so we can move forward with it. Doesn't this open the door to a ton of lawfare for the rest of this president's term?
Yes, I don't understand the decision. I mean, essentially what Chief Justice Roberts is saying, it's going to be a virtual hearing, so it won't be abusive. And don't worry about it. And I don't buy in. I don't buy that at all. It's at odds with their immunity decision, which allowed a special process and protection for a president over issues related to his time in office. All that's out the window, and we're all supposed to take Merchant at his word that he won't abuse Trump, and he's allowing audio, which is at odds with what his prior position has been there. None of this has been public before. I mean, the only good news is that, there's unlikely to be anything that results from this other than, a kangaroo court proceeding. Mm-hmm. But the president shouldn't be abused. And frankly, the courts have repeatedly, and there have been notable exceptions, failed President Trump and, frankly, the American people by not curtailing this lawfare. That it's gotten to this point is a stain on the judicial system.
Well, Tom, so you said that you're not expecting much to come of this, but do you expect to see President Trump facing any severe penalty that would, or punishment that would impede his ability to lead the nation and the free world? I mean, I don't think we're expecting jail time, but what could be the outcome here?
Well, the court has effectively promised nothing will happen, that there will be no jail, no fine, no sanction in any substantive way. But they want to excoriate him and abuse him through this process. And that does impact the country. It does impact our national security. It makes us look like we're a banana republic. And that is exactly what's going on up there. It's a kangaroo court process. Merchant is literally a donor to Joe Biden. That's pretty unusual for judges. That's not something they're allowed to do. And yet he doesn't feel like the need to recuse himself. And, of course, the whole court, I mean, the whole notion that he did anything wrong is even a sham and a smear.
Yeah.
It's terrible that Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett joined with the leftists to allow this abuse to continue.
There's a real good odds that this is going to get overturned on appeal, and there's no reason why you can hold off the sentencing until the appeals process plays out and what have you. And again, it opens the door for more. I got to ask. It's also fascinating to me, Tom, especially your role at Judicial Watch. You're very much into transparency, trying to open up the curtains that are closed on so many of these processes that don't need to be behind closed doors. Merchant famously did not allow any cameras or any recording devices of any sort in his Manhattan courtroom. But today, for sentencing, it appears he's going to open it up for all the media to be able to see and hear. That seems brazenly political, doesn't it?
Oh, it sure does. This is a really sad time for the country in the sense that it's our whole process has been hijacked by this one court, and Alvin Bragg, obviously another Democrat operative, The fact the Supreme Court doesn't think that's an issue, and after issuing a ruling that the president has immunity and all these issues arise when the president's subject to this type of court process, I mean, they're doing this to him literally a minute before he's inaugurated. And as you said at the top there, Larry, this is a path forward for other abusers who can get around now this Supreme Court position, this Supreme Court opinion on immunity, which reflects the Constitution's protection of the president. You know, how far can we go without getting the Supreme Court mad at us? And yesterday's decision shows they can go a little bit far, and who knows what's going to happen next.
Well, I mean, it's a good question, especially when we consider that there are many living presidents, some of whom I think still should be brought up on charges. Hillary Clinton comes to mind, and maybe you would agree or disagree with me on President Obama as well. But I would actually just love your thoughts on yesterday's funeral, seeing all those presidents, seeing the storylines behind each of the behind them and their hatred with one another. I would just love your thoughts on yesterday's funeral.
Well, funerals are kind of awkward social occasions as it is, and D.C. funerals, especially of former presidents, it doesn't get any more awkward and interesting than that. And to see Obama yucking up with President Trump must just drive the left crazy. And whether Kamala Harris, was just being polite and focused on the funeral or not. She's probably going to look at that today and think, man, man.
Yeah.
Hey, vibrating. Yeah.
Tom, I if I could, because as you mentioned, we're about a minute away from Donald Trump taking office with the inauguration next Monday, a week from 10 days from now. You had a frustrating time during the first Trump presidency with specifically the Justice Department, from Attorney General Sessions, and then, of course, Bill Barr, who took his place. You had challenges getting information, getting FOIA requests paid attention to. As you look at the people right now getting lined up, from Pam Bondi to Harmeet Dillon, and we just learned yesterday that Leo Terrell is going to be one of Harmeet Dillon's assistant attorney generals, or deputy assistant attorney generals. How do you like this team that's being put together right now, and do you have working relationships with any of them? Do you think that it's going to be a little bit better to get information that is legally your right and our right as American citizens to get through these FOIA requests?
Well, we'll see if we have working relationships once they get in there. To me, there's got to be a commitment by the president. Was wonderfully transparent as president. He's the most transparent president in the modern era. I mean, we can all see that. Everything he did, he was forthright on and was very public about his thinking and such. And there was a challenge, as you say, with the Justice Department, kind of this institutional secrecy. I suspect that will change a bit, but we will see. And there's got to be a commitment by his appointees to this transparency. And there has to be, in terms of this general issue of lawfare, I'd go on a transparency tear to expose everything that went on from the White House on down in terms of the targeting of Trump and other innocents. And the Justice Department is well positioned to try to vindicate the rule of law there. But I would take a step back if I were the president and say, this Justice Department institutionally is incapable of investigating itself. The FBI is incapable of investigating itself. And I'd appoint a special prosecutor, an independent counsel outside the Justice Department directly, if I were Trump, to look into what Alvin Bragg was up to look into Fani Willis and Jack Smith and Garland and all the rest on this lawfare against him.
That would be great. I'd recommend Joe DeGeneva as that special prosecutor, but then we'd lose another regular guest. We're losing all our guests to this administration, Tom. You better stay right where you are at Judicial Watch. We can't lose you as well.
Well, and the fact they're going into government should be no excuse, Larry and Patrice, from coming on your show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate that plug.
Thanks, Tom. Always good to talk with you, my friend.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live.
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
President Trump last night hosted a meeting of Republican governors at Mar-a-Lago. Boy, the ability for Trump to be able to bring people to Mar-a-Lago, this is going to continue through the presidency, by the way.
That's what I understand, that he's going to be very active from Mar-a-Lago.
It's such a big deal, and it's very different than Biden going off to his beach home in Delaware and basically having radio silence and nobody talks to him and nobody does anything. This is a very much a working place, but the fact that he can host them there, that he can wine and dine them and schmooze them and stuff, even foreign dignitaries, it's set up for security. It's a very interesting thing going on here that we really haven't seen since Reagan was able to use his ranch out in the Santa Barbara area of the West Coast. Really, that's the only other comparison, although he hated having people come and visit him at the ranch. That was his retreat. Anyway, at this meeting of Republican governors, Peter Doocy of Fox asked Donald Trump a very important question about the drones. The story of the drones over New Jersey just disappeared
off
Patrice.
of the headlines. Yeah.
Well, here, listen to this.
A story that kind of disappeared very suddenly. Do you have any idea whatever happened to the drones?
What happened to drones?
Well, you said that you thought the government knew what was happening with these drones over New Jersey. There were some by Bedminster.
I don't know. They're over Bedminster a lot, so I can imagine. I'm going to give you a report on drones about one day into the administration, because I think it's ridiculous that they're not telling you about what's going on with the drones. And it's not only with me. Glenn was telling me today that in Virginia they have drones all over the place, too.
That's right. Glenn, by the way, is Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia, who, by the way, was seated immediately to the right hand of the president. You know, that's always sort of, that's a biblical position right there.
We know who sits in the father's right hand right now.
That is correct. He was prominently there, and Governor Youngkin chimed in as well. Listen.
Nobody's reporting it. I don't know why they're not. Do you want to say something about that?
Just one quick comment, which is we are home to the largest naval base in the world in Quantico, and we house a lot of the SEAL teams and have a huge national security infrastructure. And now for 2 years running, we have had drone incursion over secure airspace, and we still don't know why. And I think that's absolutely unacceptable. And I think President Trump and the new leadership coming in, I think, will work diligently to understand who's behind this and what we do in order to stop the digital surveillance of all of our secure infrastructure.
All right, so a little bit more here. And I just want to point out, Governor Youngkin, of course, pointed out the military bases and Navy bases and Marine Corps presence in Virginia. I don't want it to go unnoticed that Trump has sort of jokingly said, well, you know, a lot of them were over Bedminster. Bedminster is Trump's New Jersey home.
That's right.
You'll remember during the last transition, a lot of the meetings and things took place at his home in Bedminster until he had to leave for security purposes, if you remember, to Trump Tower. Okay, then suddenly, after Youngkin chimes in, it opened the floodgates, and all these other Republican governors are like, yeah, we've been complaining about this to Biden and DOD for years. Here, listen.
Well, I can tell you this. While we were dealing with a terrorist attack in New Orleans, we had drones being flown over our nuclear reactors in Louisiana. And we brought that attention to the FAA. We've been asking the FAA to give these states the ability to mitigate these drones, and it's sitting on some bureaucrat's desk. And that's real.
Nobody knows. They don't want to talk about it. Go ahead, Governor. You're going to say?
I was just going to say
it's like a free-for-all now
over our infrastructure as well. And it's incredibly frustrating that we not only have no way of knowing what it is, but nobody knows how to deal with them.
They don't want to talk about it, and nobody knows why. They don't want to talk about it. That could be us sending drones. I hope that's the case, us doing it and doing research, and maybe they don't want to talk about it from that standpoint. I hope it's not an enemy, but we're going to find out on the 21st, the day after. You have to give me a little time for the inauguration, but shortly thereafter, we'll give you a report on it. We'll tell you exactly what it is. They know, and it's very strange that they aren't talking about it.
What an extraordinary scene there as they're sort of sitting at this Yeah, yes, and all the governors then start chiming in, saying, "Yeah, we've dealt with this. We've dealt with this." It was incredible, Patrice.
Well, but that's a huge story. The fact that so many states have had these drones flying over critical infrastructure, and the fact that they've reported it to the federal government, the FAA, and nothing is done about it. But
nothing is done, and they claim nothing has been said. They get no response. They hear nothing from Biden, from the White House, and from the Pentagon. Things will change. And, well, he said that first day, maybe day 2, because he's got a couple of balls to go to. He's got some other stuff on day 1. So we will watch that space. Also, you know what? We've got Attorney General Jason Miyares coming up at 8:05. We got a lot to talk to him about, but we might throw that in the mix as well.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:37. It's O'Connor and Company, and we've got a busy morning yet ahead, even though we're over halfway through this. One could say that we're past halftime. We're at the top of the third quarter, and that's probably a good analogy considering our conversation we're about to have. But I also want to let you know that at 8:05, Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares will join us. And then at 8:35, Brett Baer from Fox News Channel. I'm Larry O'Connor. That's Patrice Onwuka.
And it's a happy Friday, everybody.
It's a super happy Friday if you like football, because we got college playoffs, we've got NFL playoffs, we've got everything your heart could desire, except for, the Detroit Lions not playing. But that's because they got the bye, baby. I am so concerned, Bram Weinstein, that my Lions are going to meet my command skins at some point. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Thanks for joining us. Always good to have you. Once again, another heartbreaker or a heart attack moment for you at the end of the game against the Cowboys. But this time the excitement was delivered by Mr. Mariota. What a game it was. Are you having a blast?
Yeah, I think our broadcast should come with a disclaimer these days that if you have heart issues, you really need to be careful listening to these things.
Totally.
Every week, they since the bye, they won in some fashion on the last play of every game. So
that's an incredible stat. And undefeated all through the month of December and now into January. Yeah. And that's sort of a kind of role you want to be on as you make it to the playoffs, because if you want to go to the Super Bowl, you have to stay undefeated. So we're lined up now, the 12-5 Command Skins against the 10-7 Tampa Bay Baker Mayfields. I'm only half kidding, but I mean, if you can get into Baker Mayfield's skin, which we've seen in the past, you can do. You sort of can win the game. Is that sort of the strategy going in here?
He's had an excellent season. He probably should be in the Pro Bowl. He threw for over 40 touchdowns. He's tough. He's doubled his rush yardage this year than any other year because he'll scramble, and he's got a little bit of the, if the people who are listening are big football fans, he doesn't really run out of bounds. Like, he wants the smoke. He'll run into people. He's got a little bit of the Josh Allen out in him. He's been outstanding, and honestly, I think he's had one of the best seasons of any quarterback in the NFL. I think he's stirring the drink. They have very, very good offensive weapons. They're the only team in the NFL that is top 5 in major metrics: total offense, scoring offense, rush offense, and pass offense. So you could argue that they've got the most effective offense both sides. And so this is going to be a tall task, obviously. This is the one team that beat Washington by double digits this year. Granted, It was week 1, and that feels like years ago now. Mm-hmm. So I think they get a very different Jaden Daniels this weekend, one that's obviously far more experienced. And I think they're going to see a very different Washington defense this weekend. In week 1, they had a corner tandem that have been completely swapped out for what I think are upgrades. And, I think this team, Washington, has shown so much will, heart, desire that if you give them a chance to beat you, they will. So I'm hoping we've got another close game coming down this weekend.
And can I ask you where we stand injury-wise? It looks like it's not quite the walking wounded that we saw in the middle of the season.
No, I think they're more healthy than they've been, which is good. Same thing for Tampa Bay, actually. They've had a lot of injuries on the back end of their defense. It looks like they're getting a couple of their guys back. So it's funny how that works this time of year, guys. All of a sudden, they get upgraded on the injury report. His offensive line is something to watch for Washington. Tyler Biotish looks like he's trending to play. Missed the last week and a half with what was a bad ankle injury. Andrew Wiley should be okay. Cornelius Lucas is coming back. Brandon Coleman left the Dallas game, came back in, says he's fine. We'll see. Everybody, it's all hands on deck, as they like to put it. And the other one that's going to be very helpful is Marshawn Lattimore, who they acquired at the deadline. He played in a game and a half for them with recurring hamstring issues. Looks like he's ready to go. And the star receiver for the Buccaneers, Mike Evans, these two literally hate each other. They kicked out of games competing with one another. So that ought to be a matchup that the network will be paying a lot of attention to this weekend.
Well, nice. Well, Bram, speaking of the Bucs, are the Commanders going to be able to stop their offense? It seems like that's the defense on the Commanders is a little bit weaker. You think they're going to be able to hold the line?
Yeah. This is the key here. They've got to, and this is the other part that I think is in Washington's favor. Tampa Bay has been prolific scoring. They were against Washington. They had the ball 9 times. They scored on 7 drives. They do that again to lose. So there's no way around that. But Tampa Bay also, they turn the ball over more than any other team in the playoffs. Baker Mayfield tied for the most interceptions. They're the only team with a negative turnover margin in the playoffs, which is probably why they're not better than 10-7. Their team is probably a little bit better than what that is, but they turn the ball over. So here's the one thing that Dan Quinn has preached all year, said the team would do, said they would get the ball, they would get turnovers. They had, under his stewardship, the last few years, they were turnover machines. Previously in Atlanta, Seattle, turnover machines. That doesn't happen here. They have 17. That's one a game. That is not up to their standard. This is the team that gives you opportunities. They'll give you the ball. They got to get it. They get 2 turnovers, they're going to win. They don't, it's going to be in an up-and-down trap meet, and we'll see who gets the ball last.
And rookie Michigan Wolverine cornerback Mike Sanderstow is really coming into his own here. His name was called about as many times as Jaden Daniels in that game against the Cowboys, and he's going to factor in big time, I think, in the secondary. I'm so excited. I think this is the best game of the weekend, frankly, and I know that I'm a bit of a homer on this one, but I'm excited. One other thing, the intangibles. You never hear people say, "Oh boy, that stadium and atmosphere in Tampa Bay is really a tough one." Do they really have a home field advantage here in Tampa Bay? I don't have a feel for that.
Yes, they do. They typically sell out that stadium, and it's a cool venue. It feels a little Disney with the big boat, and they shoot the cannons off and all that stuff. But it's very cool, and they do. But I will say this: I know a ton of people going there. Washington fans have traveled everywhere. I think if we had gotten, I don't know, with Los Angeles, they had to move the game, but a week ago, when it looked like it might be the Rams, I think we would have taken over that stadium. This fan base is awakened. They've traveled. Yep. There were a ton of people in Dallas. There were a ton of people in New Orleans walking around Bourbon Street before the game against the Saints, and it took over in the stadium. I have a feeling short flight. The weather here sucks. There's a good reason to get out of here for the weekend. The get-in price is not great. I think this will tell you everything you really need to know. The get-in price is pretty high to get in there on the secondary market right now, which tells you a lot of Washington fans are in demand. So I do expect to see a lot of burgundy and gold there. And, back in the day, before there were the Carolina Panthers, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Tennessee Titans, the whole Eastern Seaboard was Redskins fans. And so oftentimes when they play in these oftentimes when they play in these southeast locations, you'll see a ton of Commanders fans there anyway, good or bad. Now that they're good, I do expect a lot of burgundy and gold to be in the stadium.
Bram, ever since COVID, I don't think Washington fans need to travel to Tampa. They've moved there. They live down in Florida now.
That's right.
So they'll be excited. All right, well, listen, we are excited to talk to you next week as we preview round 2 of the playoffs for the Commanders. But let's win this one first. Have a good time.
Thanks, Bram.
All right, thank you.
It's 7:45. WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the 5s is Steve Hirschhorn in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
Okay.
All right. So listen, that last part is great, and that's how every senator should approach their job. I wish Chris Van Hollen
with a bit of humor
and Angela Alsobrooks would do the same for us Marylanders who don't ally politically with them, but a fat chance of that happening. But what do you think of what do you hope to get out of it? Actually, is a stupid question, and I love his answer. I want to be Pope of Greenland.
Well, so what's funny is I wasn't sure if he was serious or joking, and then towards the end I said, okay, he was just joking. But I don't know what
you thought
broke.
he was serious that he wanted to be Pope of Greenland? I don't think that's an actual thing. There is no Pope of Greenland.
We know that John Fetterman has said some wacky things, has had some issues that have seemed to have scrambled things for him. But he corrected this. Whatever is different about Senator Fetterman, I like. I mean, he's certainly at least been very much more reasonable than 99% of this conference on a lot of bipartisan issues. So, we'll find out later. But it was kind of funny.
It'll be a good meeting. While we're focused on Greenland and the possible negotiation or acquisition or whatever ends up happening there with the Kingdom of Denmark, Justin Trudeau, outgoing, shamed and embarrassed and humiliated Prime Minister of Canada, wants everyone to know that Canada is not going to become part of the United States. Here he was on CNN. Wow, that is an amazing tell right there. In fact, this is exactly why Justin Trudeau is such a hapless leader of that nation. He has the moment, first of all, that's what every leader should say. No, that's not going to happen. We're proud to be Canadian. But then he says, and why are they proud to be Canadian? Because they're not American. Their entire identity is defined by what they're not instead of what they are. He doesn't understand his own people. Get off the stage, Prime Minister Trudeau.
And defined by another country. He literally just defined the people by another country. So I mean, it's not defined. It's an embarrassment that he couldn't come up with a better argument for why he thinks his people are independent, other than they're just not another country.
And that is further evidence that his people aren't actually the Canadian people; it's the Cuban people. 7:53.